We have to be bold in our national ambitions. First, we must win the fight against trade unions. Second, we must improve moral standards and improve government and society to provide a strong foundation for good governance. And third, we must change the character of our politics to promote fertile ground for reforms. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Tonight, coming to the show was a task. There were long queues seen at petrol stations. Trade unions in Sri Lanka right now are holding not the government but the people for ransom. Their fight is not against the people of Sri Lanka, which accounts to nearly 21 million. Their fight is against policymakers of the country who are leading these trade unions. Then comes the Government Medical Officers Association. They postponed their trade union action token strike for tomorrow. Who are they holding responsible at the end of the day? The people of this resplendent nation. Where are we really heading? Then tonight, this morning on the Bond Commission, there was a revelation. People were put to task. Names were revealed. The government is again on the spotlight. Can we really move ahead like this? A big question mark. Tonight, our topic of discussion is good governance, an experiment gone wrong. To discuss all this and more, we have three gentlemen we invited to the studios. However, one gentleman is still stuck in traffic. Let me introduce the rest of the two individuals who are with us this evening on the show. Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Nice to have you on board, Dr. Vijayawardena. Also joining us this evening is Mr. Rusiripala Thennakone, a civil rights activist and also a former banker. Nice to have you on board as well, Mr. Thennakone. So let's start off tonight's show with Mr. Rusiripala Thennakone, a former banker as well as a civil rights activist. What is happening in Sri Lanka right now, Mr. Thennakone? Strike after strike, people are held to ransom. What is going on? Is this the way that you expect governance to take place in a country? Your time starts now.
Yes. Now, there is an issue that we must address before we talk about this good governance. Who really wanted good governance in this country? Was it the rulers who claimed that they would provide good governance when they come into power? Or was it the people who were fighting hard to have a new government with a new face, with good governance? Now, we have to understand this issue very clearly. I think, in my opinion, the good governance was wanted by the people, for the people, and the people who suffered for a long time under a regime where they were not assured of good governance, where they had a lot of difficulties to face, where they had issues of democracy, where they had issues of freedom. Therefore, they were yearning for a new era with good governance. Therefore, there were social groups, there were political parties, and there were independent thinking people who supported that view of the people who wanted to bring in a period, an era of good governance. Then we had a set of people who were riding the crest of the wave at that time, thinking that it is a very good opportunity to find a way into power. And they chose that opportunity very wisely and very carefully, and they floated along with the wishes of the people who wanted a good governance, and riding that wave, they came to power. Now, the conflict today is between those who wanted good governance and those who want to remain in power. This is the issue in this country today, because those who wanted good governance expected many things, many changes, many new ways of addressing issues, solving their problems, solving the problems of the country for the future. Whereas the people who wanted to remain in power found a period where they had to make sure that their existence is continued, existence is guaranteed.
Mr. Nakon, the problem right now is, this is the third year for this government. If we will technically look at it, 2015, 8th January, there was a change of regime, and this government has been in power for nearly 3 years now. The question mark right now is, can they govern the country?
Well, again, the answer is, those who really did not want or did not really want a good governance but wanted only power are the cause of this problem.
But Mr. Nakon, when you really look at what has transpired over the last few months, strike after strike, let's talk about the GMO strike that was launched. This is not something that this government should take or shoulder at the end of the day. This is the wrongdoings of the past government.
Exactly.
And this government has failed to even push this on the other side of the fence and say, this is not our problem. Even the port city was not the problem of this government. They have failed over and over again to communicate this transparently to the people at large.
Samir,
and everyone thinks that it is the fault of this government in power.
Samir, I am 100% with you. This government is carrying the baby of the previous government. Take the issues, Umawe, the garbage issue, Saitam, all these are babies that were handed over to this government by the previous regime. But they did not address these issues properly, either willfully or due to their ignorance. I don't know which way it is. We have to look at the issues, how they are being handled by the government, and then come to conclusions. But my own thinking is, this is another power game that is going on.
Power game between whom?
Power game to establish a strong power-based government for one party over the other, which is not in existence today. Therefore, you know, the big issues are allowed to continue, and thinking that when there is anarchy, when there is this type of disarray in the country, that order will be restored by somebody who can do it by himself or alone. I think that's the image that they are trying to propagate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tennekon. But before moving on to Dr. W. Wijewardene, I want to ask a quick question from you. 40 years for the Prime Minister's political career. He's been the longest serving parliamentarian. He has been the opposition leader for a very, very long time in Parliament, which amounts to nearly 18 years. He was the youngest Deputy Minister of Sri Lanka at the age of 27. He was the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. All this is well and good. But the question mark right now is, a man who has nearly 4 decades of experience in Parliament, why can't he get the bolts and nuts right and start governing the country? Why, Mr. Tennekon?
It's unfortunate. He could have done it, and the country believed that he could do it. But the fact is, he is not doing it. I don't know for what reason.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rusipal Tennekon. I now move my attention to Dr. W. Wijewardene, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Wijewardene, we were talking about past sins that this government has to shoulder. There's also a very big sin that this government committed on the 27th of February 2015, the central bank bond controversy. Evidence today implicates a strongman of the government, the then finance minister. What do you take from this?
Well, it's very unfortunate, Samir, that we had this bond scam in the case of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, because this is the first time the Central Bank of Sri Lanka had been drawn into this kind of corruption charge by anyone. And what I feel, Shamir, is that had the government taken action on the 27th of February 2015 itself, when the matter came to light, these things should have been avoided by the government. But now, of course, what we see today is that day after day, we find that new evidence is coming before this bond commission, presidential bond commission, and all the evidence is revealing the things that we had been suspecting for a long period of time. And it's a matter for the nation to decide what they should do once the commission report has been out. It's a very unfortunate thing, very unfortunate.
Dr. Vijayavardhana, today's evidence revealed it was regarding an apartment complex in Colombo, and the wife of the strongman of the government was also involved in this, and later they found out that Arjun Aloysius had also visited this particular apartment complex. My question to you is very simple. All this, why? On public's money, you want an apartment and you sacrifice so much? Or is it so much more behind this veil that we are seeing right now?
These things, Samir, will have to be addressed by the Bribery and Corruption Commission, because it's basically a corruption charge. Because if somebody had accepted some donation from someone while holding a public office, whether you or your family members, it doesn't matter, it comes within the Bribery Commission Act. So it's a matter for the Bribery Commission authorities and also for the Attorney General's Department to pursue the matter further. I mean, it's not a very simple case, because once a minister has been accused of such a thing in another country, in any other country, the minister should immediately resign from his post. Because we have seen in Australia a minister who had received a gift of some $5 worth of wine, bottle of wine, that minister had to resign. So this is where we have failed in governance, observance of the governance in Sri Lanka, Shamir, and this is where the civil society, the media, the opposition political parties, even the political members of within the same ruling government, they have to rise up and protect the governance structure of the country, because the maintenance of good governance is a necessary condition for Sri Lanka to attain its sustainable growth in the future.
Dr. Vijayavardhana, do you think that if the Prime Minister and the President took firm action then, when this issue first transpired, they would have been able to stop this wound getting worse?
Exactly. I mean, on the 27th of February in the evening, Shamir, I myself got an SMS from the concerned primary dealers that there had been such a massive irregularity in the bond auction on that particular day. And it was known to the government, and also at that time, had the government taken action, very decisive action, the subsequent events wouldn't have taken place.
Dr. Vijayavardhana, one final question before I move to Mr. Chandra Jayaratna, former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. What is your take on all this?
What I feel, Samir, is that, as Mrs. Rupal Tennakoon had very correctly mentioned, the people had a lot of expectations and hope about the new government for the delivery of economic policy governance, good governance, rule of law, law and order, and so forth. But what has been delivered to them is completely the opposite. So therefore, what has now happened is that all of us have been actually stranded in between the battle, and we have to make a restart now.
Restart? So
restart.
Is there an alternative for this situation?
Nothing can be done, because it appears, right now? Samir, that the way that the things are happening, it's very difficult for any society to reform itself within the present framework.
Thank you very much. That, of course, was Dr. W. Vijayavardhana, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. And now my attention to Mr. Chandra Jayaratna, a former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Nice to have you on board, Mr. Jayaratna. How was the traffic, by the way?
Unbelievable. Everywhere the petrol stations were there, we were stuck for 20 minutes.
Ms. Jayaratna, I move your attention to one of your pet areas, democracy. You're a staunch supporter of democracy. When you really look at trade unions behave in the country nowadays, launching strikes based on their whim and fancy, keeping the people at risk, putting the burden on them, because of the wishes of a few thousand people, 21 million people are at risk. What is your take? The massive population in Sri Lanka are at risk. Do you think Sri Lanka can be governed democratically, 100%? Or do we need an autocratic hand as well when taking decisions? Your time starts now.
I don't believe that the latter is necessary. Democratic governance has proven its capabilities elsewhere in the world and have delivered. But democracy does not mean what we are seeing today. Democracy on both sides. I'll give you one good example about trade unions. When I happened to be in one of my older positions in the private sector, my company used to give the best meal in town. Nobody could. It had chicken curry, cashew nuts, everything. Everything that the workers wanted was there in a meal for lunch. But they would walk out. One day they'll say there is a cockroach in the rice. Right? Cockroach is introduced by them and they say it's a rice. But we also made a mistake then. We also reacted very autocratically. We dismissed all our workers and started afresh. But later we learned that the way to manage this is different. If you involve all the workers, the very same company today runs at 1/3 of what the number of staff they used to run before. But workers themselves have improved their productivity to be one of the largest in the world. So it is, I won't blame the working class only or the trade unions only. I would blame the rulers as well as those who are ruled and the trade unions. I'll give you one example. First and foremost, this government has come into play. I think they have there is a coalition. They do not understand how a coalition should work. I'll give you one just quick example. Let us say your company, Maharajas, goes and acquires tomorrow your opposing television station, let us say X Limited. They and you have been fighting for market share. You do an amalgamation. Now you who have been fighting with them have to get there and produce results to your bottom line. Now what do? Do you say, I'm right but Maharajas is now taken over, they have 60%, the others say have 40%. Do you go and tell those fellows, you do what we say? No. You'll sit together, agree the vision, the mission which you're going, but most importantly, a minimum levels below which some policies will not be altered. So you prepare a plan to work on which one side will not. This is the minimum achievement we want and we will build bridges from that minimum position. I mean, that's how the world of business works in an acquisition. Then as you grow on, together you tackle problems. Together you face whatever the issues that are there. I believe this government hasn't done that even after nearly 2 years in office.
Ms. Jayaratna, the problem right now, is it not realizing that they're in the coalition, they're working in a coalition government, or the problem right now is there is no proper direction from the top?
That is true too. But there again, answering the question that you were discussing earlier, I presume that was the part of the question that Dr. Vijayawardena tackled. If you want, some of the issues that we are facing today can be very quickly decided. If this team decides we want to decide on, we want to take this path. You don't have to wait for the constitution to change. You don't have to wait for parliamentary bills to be paid. Take a quick, they are not autocratic. Both have agreed. You put your things to the public, get the public's view, and the minimum standards you want to maintain for democracy, for transparency, for good governance, you institute them by executive orders.
Vijayaratna, good governance. Has this experiment gone wrong in Sri Lanka?
Good governance experiment has been made to go wrong by interested parties, and it hasn't gone wrong. I still believe good governance is still very capable. If you do three very simple things, if you get a code of conduct, or like a cabinet, code of cabinet as there is in the UK, where there has to be certain rules, regulations, disclosures, that's one. Second is, make the secretaries of ministries the chief accounting officer, who's not under the supervision and administrative control. The word control was brought in the 72 constitution. Take that out, make them the policy maker, the ministers, make them only give policy decisions. All the money and the funds are given to the secretaries, hold them responsible. Thirdly, hold the people in power, executing executives, to be accountable with two things: accountable for results, accountable to give and report any misdemeanor. If there is any non-compliance with laws and regulations, the executive, the professionals who are at work are made to report it. This country will run in a perfect style if you do these three simple things.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chandra Jayaratna, former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. I want to now ask you, is this all practical? But I'll leave that for later. I'm going to introduce our journalist this evening. On to my far left is Charita Fernando. On to my immediate left is Chaturanga Hapwarachi. And on to my immediate right is Farah Shahguda. Nice to have you on board for us. Interesting facts revealed that the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the bond scam today. I need to tell our viewers that this is just evidence. No one has been found guilty yet. So our conversation today, which we will be having with our panelists, would be on the remarks that have been made at the Presidential Commission of Inquiry. We are not trying to direct our point or direct our finger at any individuals per se on the show. So let's open the floor, but very quickly for us to get your thoughts on the Presidential Commission of Inquiry today. What did you fathom when you heard this evidence being spoken of at the Bond Commission?
Quite frankly, Shamir, it's a champagne moment for all journalists, for the media. There can't be any better way of describing it. After months and months and months and months of wasting time and appointing all sorts of dodgy committees and so on, we finally appear to be at the end of the tunnel. And so, good news for the media, good news for transparency. Absolutely champagne moment today.
Champagne moment indeed. So let's open the floor for questions. Let's start off with Chaturanga.
Thank you, Sham. I want to ask an open-ended question from Mr. Tennakon at the very outset. Mr. Tennakon, political representative, a person who is appointed by the people to represent the public themselves, their assets seem to be the question that the public is discussing when it comes to vehicles, when it comes to houses. This seems to be the problem at hand with the people, because while the people are suffering, the politicians are enjoying themselves. That seems to be what is going on. If we are to, at a point, figure out that a politician, an individual politician is having more benefits in terms of maybe a flat or an apartment complex maybe, how do we get this into our heads? How do we say that, how do we figure it out? Do we go to an asset declaration? How do we figure it out?
Well, We are witnessing a transition that has been taking place in the political arena in this country for over many years. You know, we have had the experience of seeing ministers who have been holding very high positions. After their retirement, their bank accounts showed two-figure balances. In some cases, 48 rupees. You know, these are well-known facts in the political circles in this country. Unfortunately, the recent transitional trends that we began to experience and see showed highly corruptive activities by the ministers, by the parliamentarians, by those in authority. And what we see today is a saturated state of that affair. There is no end. If we look at the beginnings of some of these people, some did not even have a bicycle to ride on. Today, the limousines that they are using, I don't think even the American president is using it. I mean, in his capacity personal, as a wealthy person may be, but not at the stake of the state. This is the state of affairs. They own flats, they own vehicles, they own properties, they own companies, they own ships. And some have shares in airline companies as well. So, this is what we are seeing today, Chaturanga. It's a very unfortunate state of affairs. This is the transition that we are experiencing today, and this is what the people who aspired to have good governance in this country should carry forward for the future, to eliminate these characters from the political scenario.
Mr. Nakon, but who is at fault? Let's take a look at Sri Lanka's law. We saw a former minister being found guilty and only charged 2,000 rupees, Sarana Gunawardena, for not declaring his assets. What sort of precedents does all this make? So well, our laws itself are not strong enough.
I think the laws are strong enough. But in that particular case, the offence was not declaring the assets. Probably it was not a question of what was in the assets. So there are two different things. You are not declaring the assets, and somebody examining after it is declared what is in the asset is another issue. Therefore, I think the offence that they dealt with was the non-declaration part, for which the punishment was, you know, like 2,000 rupees, some penalty or something like that. But the stronger thing or the more serious thing is somebody has to go into what the assets are declared. If those assets are not accountable assets, not legitimately earned assets, of course the offence should be much greater. Therefore, these are two different things.
Mr. Tenakon, I want to follow up. Now, we know that when it was people from the previous government, especially the land that was found in Malwana, there were proper investigations done into how the construction activities were carried out and how much actually was spent on the construction activities. Maybe if some minister of this current government is having a house being rebuilt for about 200 million rupees, and if this same minister is having an apartment complex for about 165 million rupees, my earlier question, I'm going to follow it up. How or who has to go and find this out?
You see, now there is no secret about this, Chaturanga. What the state has to do is to initiate an investigative role to find out how these people have amassed so much of wealth. They cannot do this, no?
But they can come in. Let's take the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, for example.
Yes.
Let's say someone is brought before the commission.
Yes.
That same person can tell, you know, look, so what's wrong? I am a minister. My wife or my children can have a company. That, you know, this is what's going to happen. What's wrong in that?
We have had very beautiful examples in this country, you know, people coming and leaving elephants near the temples and going. Where in the world have we had like this happening? Dumping elephants near the temple door?
No, I think Mr. Tenakon, what Chaturanga's question is, conflict of interest cannot be proven at certain instances. Intention cannot be proven.
It is not a question of intention.
In a situation like that,
sorry,
can this very minister or whoever is responsible go scot-free?
No, they cannot. it is not a question of conflict or anything. You see, if a proper asset inquiry can be instigated, can be started, where there is mechanism for such things. Only problem
there is the law. The law is
there
present.
is law, there is a mechanism, there are also, I mean, machinery for that. But unfortunately, those things are not given effect.
Mr. Jayaratne, you are a very close, was a close supporter of this government. I recollect you were a campaigner. You said the alternative at that time was not the previous regime. Take a look at what has been happening with regard to the bond commission itself. What is your take?
My take is that there is no will in the part of the government to do this. I'll give you the first of my issues. I have taken this up. I have written 3 letters to the President, to everybody. Just take the question of, let's take the income tax. This, I have got 2 opinions from Sri Lanka's best known tax. One is a tax lawyer, one is a tax accountant, right? Who have said that the bond profits made on trading, not you and I holding it on a personal basis, an entity who's doing business is liable. Because there is a law in the tax act which says that if any transaction is not at arm's length what it is supposed to be, you and I hold when we buy, there is no tax because the tax is already deducted. But in the case of a corporate entity who's doing it as a business, he's doing a business, he's not engaging in holding the asset like you and I. He's doing a trading activity. So, profits tax should have been charged, whatever that is. Second, financial VAT. That profits is liable to financial VAT. And as we have seen, this company has not declared and shown on the it was published in the newspapers. This company's quarterly accounts do not show that they are paying any dividends. They are transferring them through related party transactions into subsidiaries and moving the money out. Deemed dividend tax. These 3 things alone on their disclosed profitability would have brought the country 500 to 600 million rupees.
Mr. Jayaratne, but the point is, the company in question could always turn around and say, we were trying to make a profit.
Make profit, okay, we are not complaining on the profit. If the profit is made, assess it properly. You get a tax holiday, right?
So are you trying to say that this company in question, Perpetual Treasuries, have not even paid their taxes?
No, my point is, them not paying is one thing. Why is that Department of Inland Revenue, after by bringing it up, writing to the President, copying it to them, not taking it up?
But by law, are they obliged to pay tax, Mr. Vijayamodana?
Yes, they are. In fact, as Mr. Jayaratne said, what is exempted is the withholding tax, which is deducted at source. That's the tax on the interest income. But if you sell the asset at a higher price and if you make a profit, it's a trading transaction. So just like any other company, they would have paid income tax at the rate of 26% on the profits they have made.
So what about the profits they would have made in the secondary market?
Even it doesn't matter, because if what happens is, if I have bought a land and if I have sold that land at a higher price, I have made a capital gain, and the capital gain is my profit, and I am liable to pay income tax on the profits I have made, just like an ordinary business.
Can I just return to Chaturanga's question? The minister, let's say a minister, can legitimately say that he has no interest in a business. The business is owned by a trust, and as far as he knows, one of his family members is the trustee, and therefore he has no conflict of interest.
That of course it's a legal issue for us, because I am not in a position to comment on that, because we have to look into the details of the particular transaction that you are referring. But what happens is, when a trust is established, again there are trust beneficiaries.
No, but Dr. Vijayawardhan, has there been instances in Sri Lanka
No. Not in the past.
Not in the past,
because
so
when you set up a trust, Shamir, always there are trustees and there are beneficiaries of the trust. The beneficiaries of the trust are liable for taxes and they are liable for anything.
So, Mr. Rusipala, is it more rather than a conflict of interest, is it more a question of ethics?
Yeah, now, are we really worried about the tax element or the corrupt practices that they resorted to? I think in my own opinion, I will be least interested in the tax element. They have robbed the country.
First is recovery, Mr. I want to be, having said that, I have to correct you.
No, I'm not finding fault with you. I'm not finding fault with you, Chandra. I'm not saying, I'm not saying that, but the main concern of the public of this country in this particular issue, the bond affair, is not the failure of the government to collect taxes from these corrupt elements.
No, but the
they have gone and robbed the provident fund of this country. They have played duck and drake with that money, public money. Our sole interest is punish those people.
So what you're saying is that bond gate is wrong right from day one.
Exactly. Exactly. It is not a question of bringing them into the law book by taxing them.
That is the beginning.
But that's the beginning, Mr. Nagan. At the end of the day, you cannot have a court proceeding on ethics. You can't do that. You have to have a foundation.
I see a difference between confiscation and taxing.
So how can
Where
you do it?
confiscation is required, taxing won't be a solution.
Mr. Vijayawardena,
confiscate their properties.
Can there be a reversal of this bond transaction that has taken place?
Because whatever the transactions that have taken place in the government securities market, you cannot reverse it. Those are sovereign bonds issued by the government of Sri Lanka. You cannot cancel them, and also those sovereign bonds can change from hand to hand, and eventually it may be a person who has nothing to do with the particular transaction who is holding the bond right now. So you cannot penalize that person. But of course, when I combine the two arguments of Mr. Chandrajayaratna and Mr. Rusipala, what Mr. Chandrajayaratna tried to mention was that this particular company in question had even violated the country's income tax laws. In addition to the robbing of the funds belonging to the EPF, robbing of the funds belonging to all other public sector institutions, and also getting into some unethical transactions in the bond market, those are separate issues. But what matters to us is, now if we look at all these things that the particular company has done, there is a valid reason for the government to take criminal action against the particular company.
But Dr. Vijayawardena, one of the former Chief Justices of Sri Lanka, in one of these landmark cases, I think it was involving LMS, he said that when the beginning is flawed, no good can come out of it thereafter.
That's true. That's true.
And therefore, Mr. Jayaratna's argument about collecting taxes is just by the way, because first of all, they need to get to the bottom of it.
No,
and,
in fact,
and the start is wrong.
Yeah, in fairness to Mr. Jayaratna, I will have to say that he is the first person who took this up with the Supreme Court with two other public action activists. And unfortunately the case was not approved by the Supreme Court. Therefore he had been behind this wrong and unethical beginning that you are referring to in the particular transaction. What he had mentioned now is, even at a subsequent time, the tax authorities would have taken action.
But there has to be a basis. There has to be a basis to file a lawsuit. You can't just file a lawsuit on the basis of ethics.
This income tax violation is a clear one.
violation.
I mean, you don't have to, get anyone else to, support it. It's actually the Inland Revenue Department will have to collect the taxes.
But the whole purpose of the Bond Commission is to find out what actually went wrong. And obviously something definitely went wrong with Bond Gate, as witness after witness after witness under oath is saying what was essentially said at the first COPE committee proceedings, and it's only been repeated for the third time now, because there was another COPE committee and so on. So do you, under the rules of that's available to the Monetary Board and therefore to the central bank as the regulator for all this, what action is possible from the central bank in terms of recovering some or all of the money?
For us, it's not the central bank which has to take action to recover the money. Central bank can, all the things that central bank does, it can cancel the license of the company. But of course, there are other law enforcement agencies in the country which have to take action.
But they have been suspended for 6 months now.
Yeah, that's only for a period of 6 months, which may not be sufficient for anyone to take action against this particular company, because in my view, it is too short. I mean, they should have completely, permanently cancel the license.
In October 2016 on Newsline, when you were my guest, you said that the Monetary Board of Sri Lanka appears to have gone to sleep.
It has.
And do you think then that the other investigatory bodies, like the police and the Inland Revenue and so on, have also been in deep slumber during these last 2 years?
Well, they had been in deep slumber for us, but of course now with the evidence that has appeared before the Bone Commission, which is now in public knowledge, nobody can go to sleep right now. No one.
Mr. Jayaratna, I want to ask you a question with regard to the information that we've received from the evidence provided at the Commission today. We spoke about this code of conduct, 3 points you mentioned earlier. We had the March 12th declaration before the general election back in 2015. Has the parties, maybe the United National Party, the UPF, SLFP, JVP, has anyone said, we will declare assets in the run-up at any point in this country?
Well, the March 12 declaration required them to do that, but
several parties, I think,
declaring the assets alone won't do, Chaturanga. What you need is that those declare. There are suggestions which have been under consideration, and I cannot go into details, where they should be publicly available. If you put all these asset declarations on a system where people can get not the bank account where the amount is or whatever, that the person has so many bank accounts, not the balances even, he has so many cars, he has so much of land. So you declare those and people can start then. Now today the law is such that even if you get the details of the asset, you cannot give it. You can take it, you can just keep it to yourself. You can't give it to a third party. These things have to be changed. So my answer to that is, it takes time. If the president wishes, if parliament is not passing, let him pass it. That might be an autocratic action, but it is not autocratic because the constitution provides him with the power to do this, to require a cabinet to declare their assets, to declare their interests, right? And where they have, and for them to give annually a declaration that they have not been participant in any breaking of the law, they have not assisted in making any law, they have not acquired anything wrong. Getting those declarations of good governance requires not even a law, but if somebody doesn't do it, make an executive order. People will clap tomorrow the president if he makes an executive order requiring good governance from them. Let's take some of these things that have been reported in the news media. Some of the payments that have been made by the treasury. Money would have been paid, some officer has paid on the instructions of a political authority. Let us not go into the details. Now, if that person is made liable for a wrong payment, that person should, and he should be required to declare if he is asked to say something wrong. Now, the accountants have adopted this particular policy from the 17th of July. If any accountant, under the Accounting Standards Board Code of UK, which has been adopted here, international accounting standards, they are required to report or do some processes if you are found that you are come to know that there is any kind of non-compliance with laws and regulations. So why can't we put this into action with every single employee in the government service? Every single professional adopts this. This country can tomorrow turn around into good governance. I mean, I'm not for a moment, I want to repeat myself, I do not want people who have done something wrong to go away, but what I'm saying is action at least to show that if you take action 10 years time when this case is over, right, if they have enjoyed X billion rupees, whoever it is has enjoyed X billion rupees for so many years, then what's the use of recovering the X billion rupees at the end of it? Till you recover, take whatever you can, because the law is slow in this country. All I'm saying is do some of these things. Take the power of a minister to transfer employees, take action against them. Public Service Commission, these are all things that were there in the past. Ministers could not do things, but today the secretaries of ministries are made subservient to a minister by the Constitution. So till the Constitution is amended, President gives an order executively, people will clap him. People will vote him back into power for the fact of doing an autocratic action which is in the good governance.
Mr. Nakon, just for a second, Mr. Nakon, many people now say that the popularity of this government is slowly fading away. Let's say the president takes a firm action, just like Mr. Jayawartha said, an autocratic decision, and everything goes well, and those who are responsible are brought before the law and are punished. What would happen then? Do you think that there will be some sort of improvement? Will the president get some points under his belt? Would he be able to tell the people, I did the right thing, and gain that popularity back?
In my personal opinion, I think the president of this country still is trusted and believed by the people. And the people know that he is in a mess because of this combination, because of the special and the unprecedented manner in which this coalition came into being, and people still have hope that this president will find a way out to deliver what the people expected of him.
So you think that the president has to be autocratic now and take a firm stand and stay his ground?
I don't think he has to be that autocratic, but as Chandra said, there are certain powers that the president can himself exercise under the existing. Fortunately, the constitution is left with certain powers that should be there already. It has not been totally eliminated.
Article 32,
yes.
33, 2H of the Constitution.
Yes.
I will just say, in addition to the powers, duties and functions expressly conferred or imposed on or assigned to the President by the Constitution or other written law, the President shall have power under Section H to do all such acts and things not inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution or written law, as by international law, custom, usage. The President is authorized or required to do so.
Mr. Jayawartha, and this is the very constitution that many civil rights organizations want abolished.
They want the constitution abolished, keeping some good points like this in place.
Fortunately, this has not been repealed yet.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Javadana, now the time is running out for this government, and it looks like the opposition is gathering some steam. So in this backdrop, the government announcing that, okay, we are going to finish complete investigations in 3 months, or you summon the board of directors of the Sri Lankan Airlines in the presence of ministers, and we heard about the tone of that meeting, the climate of that meeting in the media. Is that the right approach to tackle this delay in holding people accountable?
Definitely by using that type of tactics will not work, Charita, because what would happen is it will annoy the people who are also involved in these particular activities. The best thing the government could have done is, when it came to power in January 2015, they could have made all these pronouncements right at the beginning. These are the policies that we follow. This is what we mean by economic policy governance. And people like me, we have written article after article what is meant by economic policy governance and how should the Prime Minister behave, how should other cabinet ministers behave. So these things should have been brought into a general statement which should have been declared by the government, and then the rest of the government sector organizations should have followed it. But of course, as you say, after in the middle of their term, if they just summon a person and blackguarding that person, that is not good governance. Good governance is actually following good principles, and those good principles are applicable to people in power as well as people who are being ruled. So therefore it's not a good thing.
Yeah, so we also know that civil society has been asking for a special tribunal to deal with cases involving VIPs or high-ranking public officials, but we haven't seen much movement in that direction. So what can the government do to ease the erosion of public confidence?
They will have to immediately, Charita, now actually in fairness to President, I will have to congratulate and compliment the President for deciding to appoint this bond commission, because had the bond commission not been appointed, all the charges which the civil society activities would have made would have been just branded as mere suspicions or speculations. But now, of course, evidence after evidence will confirm what the civil society activists had been confirming. So the President had done the correct thing by appointing the commission. He had done the correct thing by changing the minister, the portfolio of the Ministry of Finance. So likewise, there had been some action he had taken. But what matters to us today is the government is responsible for every action it has taken, and it has failed to take action against its own members, as the commission, what is revealed in commission today, if it is true, it's a serious charge against the one of the leading politicians of the country. So what we need today is the rule of law, where even the government politicians have broken the law, they have to be dealt with severely, as in the case of the dealings with other other criminals of the country.
I'll add one sentence to that.
Very quickly,
I would ask every professional from tomorrow, taking a note of today, every professional, every accountant, at least they are bound, every accountant, every auditor, if they follow the practice of NOCLA, that is where they are aware of a non-disclosure. All these non-disclosures, whichever, if the payments have been made by the company's auditors, at least now let the auditors of these companies come out. Not only this particular, every company where people have seen, every auditor, every accountant, in practice or in employment, if before the end of this month they take the process under the Code of Ethics of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and every one of them, today all auditors are chartered accountants of public companies and others, let them take the process. If they report it to the company, if the company doesn't do anything, report it to the authorities.
But is it all practical, Mr. Jayaratne? It's all well and good. There are policies, but is it practical to do that?
My dear,
asking all the accountants.
My dear, the famous thing what they are all will say is, oh, you can't get anything done in the port to remove anything without paying a bribe. I'm not talking of that kind of bribery. This is the problem. They are shifting the problem to the bribery of a 2 cents to a coolie or a clerk. I am talking of the extreme money laundering that is taking place. You think the accountants and auditors of this country don't know about money laundering? Do you think the bankers don't know? Do you think that the lawyers do not know all the investments they are making, people who are making, whose deeds are written in other people's names? They are all non-compliance with rules and regulations.
Let's say the entire garden of apples decide, okay, let's do it right. But there's one bad apple in that garden. Then what happens?
The bad apple will get eliminated, because when it becomes a part of a culture, what has happened is our culture has shifted from where it was today. We need a new start, and that new start will have to be given by the professionals, by the bring the Audit Act and make the executive liable for surcharge. Why is that not coming through? That was a 100-day promise. So good governance is required. All the good governance requirements have been stated by this government in the 2015 elections, beginning and January and August. Implement them. And where necessary, my appeal is where necessary, bring executive orders and show it's not too late. Get to work on the balance period. I'm not interested in the governments. I'm interested in the people being delivered. Let us deliver what we have to promise to the people.
Before we go into to a short commercial break, very quick question to Mr. Tennakon. Mr. Tennakon, you praised the president and you said that the president made the right choice, did the right thing. But I want to drag your attention to just a few months after this bond scam took place. Parliament was very hurriedly dissolved.
Yes.
Was that an opportunity for the high echelons of the government to take a firm stand and put this right?
Shamir, that is the first turn where this entire expectation of good governance lost its standing. Why? That dissolution of the parliament was meant for what? Why did they did it 10 months ahead of schedule? That government could have continued in power for the next 10 months. People have forgotten the statistics. That government had a further period of 10 months to go ahead, but suddenly there was pressure from the Prime Minister and the party, the majority party, members of that the rulers, to dissolve the government. President had no alternative but to dissolve.
Because at that time there was an impeachment motion that was brought against the then finance minister, Mr. Tennakon.
There are two things. The bond issue, the first report of the first COPE report was to be put out the day the parliament was dissolved. So you can see how these things have been worked out. Why did they want the government to be dissolved at that time? Because the party that got the majority in the ruling sector in that government, that 100-day government, did not have a majority in parliament.
Thank you very much.
And they wanted to ensure a majority government, and therefore they wanted to go for elections prematurely. All these Lichavi talks, all these, the ideas of joining hands, forming coalitions, national government, failed at that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tennakon. We're now going for a short commercial break. When we come back, we would delve more deep on the issues surrounding the Presidential Commission on the bond scams and also good governance. All this and more after the short commercial break. Stay connected. Stay with Face the Nation.